Good evening. My name is Tom Vasquez, and this is my final class project for MSM 525, the Spirit of Enterprise class. And in my 5-minute video, I'll review a case getting a lot of attention in the media this week. It has to do with GM shutting down its plants over various areas of the country, but I'm specifically going to focus in on the Hamtramck plant in Detroit, Michigan. Now in this quick review, I will be using all the knowledge, skills, and attitudes attained after 8 weeks of this course and show where the elements of the Catholic social teaching, the 4 cardinal virtues, and some scriptural teachings were not properly applied, resulting in harm toward others and not putting people over profits. We're going to talk about the human dignity as a principle. We're going to talk about the common good, the spirit of solidarity and subsidiarity, all the 4 cardinal virtues, prudence, justice, courage, and temperance, and even going to talk a little bit about the 10 Commandments. So first, I'd like to start with the story as an overall backdrop as to what's going on with this case. Now, this is a story of a business closure and reorganization. When a company falls on bad times, as often is the case, they need to reorganize. They need to downscale, usually to just stay afloat, or just risk not being closed. But what makes this case specifically a little different from any other case where business is closed? And it has to do with the ethics and morals involved over the course of the life of the plant at Hamtramck. So let's go over those. The first thing that brings that sheds some light as to why this case is something to be looked at is, how did the Hamtramck plant come into existence in the first place? GM couldn't do this alone. That's the interesting thing. In 1980, in an effort, it always starts with good intentions, the government, the local government there in Detroit, Michigan, decided to partner up with GM and give them land that didn't belong to GM and land that didn't belong to the government neither. They used a very new concept in that time called eminent domain. And they targeted an old Catholic Polish neighborhood to take up their neighborhood, leveled the whole neighborhood, ousted everybody, took their property, and gave it over to GM. Now that sparked a lot of controversy, and that's a subject unto itself. But the key there is, you can see real quick that there's a violation there. It goes back to the 10 Commandments. Thou shalt not steal, the 7th commandment. You cannot take that which is not yours. But the government did, in an effort to do what it wanted, partnered with GM and created a Hamtramck plant, creating controversy at the expense of innocent people. But let's keep going. After the plant's established, okay, it does bring in jobs. It does give some social stability and upward movement for some. But what happens in around 2008? GM is given bailout money. Now, leading up to 2008, we already saw where GM was losing consistently, and they're losing big, in the billions, in the years leading up to the 2008 bailout. Nobody wanted to finance the GM operation anymore. So what did GM decide to do to stay afloat? They petitioned the government. They have allies in the government. And the government said, well, okay, then we'll step in, and gave them a very controversial bailout of $13.4 billion to stay afloat. It was deemed too large to fail. Okay, that in of itself can also be a case study. But we're going to keep on going. Now that the government, the people's money has been put to use by you to stay afloat, what happens in 2010? Another controversial effort where the government now, feeling that it has some ownership, feeling that it has some sway, starts to meddle in the production of things. Again, not in the spirit of democratic capitalism, where the government has its role and private business has its role. And here the government steps in and decides to push a product that the market didn't ask for, electric cars. Instead of letting the market drive it, government wanted to step in, and GM was powerless or didn't stand up for it due to its debt situation and its relationships. Complicated the thing. And that now led to where we're at today. The Hamtramck plant is one of the main plants for that electric car. The one the government insisted on putting, the one the government prompted with the partnership of GM, leveled a neighborhood that didn't belong to them to do this, and now after all these years has come to a failure. And how are they getting out of the business here at Hamtramck? They're cutting and running, or so says the people there in Detroit. They decided to tell the workers, first when there was rumors about that there was going to be a closure, management decided to come out in front of that and say that that's rumors and it's not true. They had town hall meetings, they published letters to reassure the worker that everything's okay, you need not worry. And then, over Thanksgiving break, they decided to, when all the workers are away, to make the announcement that there is going to be a closure. And do it, and that closure begins in about 3 months. So at the end of November, they get word, official word, then you got December, the holidays, then you got January, and in February some people are giving pink slips. It gave the worker no time to respond. And it was delivered in such a way that it violated, in their view, the respect that they have rightfully earned. It goes to that violation of human dignity. It goes to that violation of what are you chasing? Is it just profits for you? Is it just, why not consider the common man here and maybe even treat them a little better, more respect? Let them know. Help them. If it's gonna fall on hard times, there's a better way to go about this. Okay, so where are the overall breakdowns? And we talked about 7th commandment, thou shalt not steal, and in this case, take, right? That which isn't yours. It already starts to off-kilter the situation. Prudence on the part of GM. There's tons of management decisions that can be looked at, but when you're starting to go against your basic core principles, market-driven business, that's not being very prudent, exercising those virtues that we taught here. There's a lack of subsidiarity. Again, I understand there could be a case, that's why it's controversial, where the government can step in at some times to help. But subsidiarity teaches that the things of a higher order should not interfere into the things of a lower order when they should be able to solve the problem, work through the problem on their own. They're just in a support role, not a direct fix role. And there's a violation of that. There's also a lack of solidarity and a lack of human dignity shown in the way they went about the closure. There's a lack of justice, because after all, the taxpayer saved you. You could consider something else, particularly with this plant here. And looking at the U.S., they're breaking down businesses, not globally. No. They're breaking them down in the U.S., where they got their survival. It starts to raise those questions of what is going on here, and the claims that this is unjust. And of course, the lack of the common good. You're leaving a place worse off than how you found it. It's just not in keeping with good management. So, the goal of this course was to teach guidelines and principles that help a company to be a force for good. When you see it from a business, when you see a business as a vocation, a calling from God, and that your purpose is to produce wealth for people and provide them a means to work, you can better see where the failures really lie in this story and how we can do better in the future. And I'm going to quote in Laborem Exercens, the piece of On Human Work from John Paul II, the great John Paul II, because he says it best. And I'm going to quote. When he says, the primary basis of the value of work is man himself, who is its subject. The man is destined for work and called to it. In the first place, work is for man and not man for work. Whenever you enter into business, it's people. It's about people. And then also, this even strengthens the claim and this or the findings of this review when it says this: work is a good thing for man, a good thing for his humanity, because through work, man not only transforms nature, adapting it to his own needs, but he also achieves fulfillment as a human being, and indeed, in a sense, becomes a more a human being. The vocation of business is a serious one. It directly correlates to the soul of a man, and here is a case where we could have done better by our workers. That concludes the review of this case. I'm taking away a lot of knowledge here from how to do business right, and I appreciate the course and all that it did for me over these last 8 weeks, and thank you.